Hello, Boyd Buchanan. I feel like we have this deep connection somehow because I graduated from Boyd a little over 15 years ago. Oh my goodness, since when am I the guy who had stuff happen to him 15 years ago? Some of you guys weren't even alive then, and some of you might know who I am, but I kind of doubt it. Some teachers might remember who I am as well, but I also kind of doubt that too because I only went to Boyd for my last 2 years of high school. Anyway, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Brett Ellis. I live in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and no one knows where that is, and that's okay. Up until fairly recently, I was a youth minister at a church in southern Alabama. I'm married to my wife, Betsy, and we have triplets that are 11 months old. I like long walks in the woods, a good bag of pork rinds, cooking and feeding for my friends and family. I also love to ask really good get-to-know-you questions like, what's the last thing you spent too much money on? For me, it was almonds, like a lot of flavored almonds. Or, what has your weird neighbor done recently? I saw mine washing their dishes outside with a hose instead of in their kitchen. Or, what are you such a snob about? Mine is recipes. If you don't have something that you need in a recipe, move on and cook something else. Greek yogurt does not substitute for sour cream just because it tastes similar. Anyway, enough about me. I want you guys to know that I'm super excited to be with you in video format right now. And so, I so badly wish I could be there in person, but COVID. So, I want to tell you guys that when I was a kid, maybe in the 5th grade or so, I loved art. I loved penciling, inking, painting, and pastels mostly. The church I was a part of at the time did this thing called VBS, stands for Vacation Bible School, which sounds like anything but a vacation, but whatever. When everyone was preparing for it, they had to build set pieces for the drama, and I really wanted to help do the artwork, so I signed my name up. A week later, I went to check out who would be helping out with the artwork for everything, and I went down the list and went name by name and was getting really excited about getting to work together with all of these older teenagers and adults that were really cool to put together something it was beautiful and all these set pieces and decorations for the week. But as I went down the list, I realized something. The spot where I had signed my name had some smudge marks on it. Someone had erased my name. I couldn't believe that someone had taken me off of the volunteer list. I mean, it's a volunteer list, right? So all of a sudden, I find out I'm not even good enough to volunteer as an artist. It was really frustrating. It's a terrible thing to feel left out. I mean, you feel lonely, uncomfortable, awkward, or like we don't have any real friends. I hope that you have never felt this way, but let's be realistic, you probably have. If you have ever experienced something like this, I am so sorry, and you are not alone. We've all had times when we felt hurt or left out or ignored. For you, maybe you walked into a room where people were hanging out without you, or maybe they were even talking about you. Awkward. You looked at social media to see all of your friends having the time of their lives while you were at home in your fuzzy pajamas looking at your phone. I know we all do that. Believe it or not, there is a story in the Bible about someone who was left out, but got an invitation to join in on something big anyway. Meet Thomas. Thomas was one of Jesus' closest friends before Jesus was crucified. But when Jesus died, Thomas just disappeared from the story for a little bit. Actually, a lot of people did. He disappeared. If you're not familiar with the story of Jesus' death, I'll kind of sum it up. Jesus was put on trial, he was convicted, beaten, and eventually murdered in a public, horrible event. It's a terrible and brutal story. And when Jesus died, many of his followers thought that this beautiful rebellion that he had started on earth was done. It was over. Jesus' disciples, even those he was really good friends with, all of them ran for their lives. They were fearful they would also be killed or hurt some way. It was a group of women who were brave enough to actually venture out first. 3 days after Jesus was buried, the women walked to the tomb to tend to Jesus' body. But instead of Jesus, they encountered an angel who told them what happened, that Jesus had risen from the dead. When Jesus died, Thomas wasn't around, but there were other disciples who were all still hanging out and mourning the fact that Jesus was dead. But Thomas kind of kept his distance. And sometime after Jesus rose from the dead and the news of his resurrection had begun to spread, many of Jesus' disciples were spending time together at someone's house, without Thomas, of course. That's when something incredible happened. To everyone's amazement, Jesus just showed up in that little room where they had been waiting and mourning. But Thomas, obviously, like I said, he was not there. Thomas was left out on one of the most important events ever recorded in biblical history. Was when Jesus came back to life. All of Jesus' disciples encountered him in his resurrected body. Everyone, that is, except for our friend Thomas. We don't know why Thomas was missing. Maybe he was angry, he was grieving, or terrified. We really don't know. But what we do know is that Thomas showed up and heard the story from the other disciples after the fact. So after missing such an important moment, it may seem like this is an end to his story, to Thomas's story, but it's actually the beginning of a brand new chapter. In John 20, it says, "But Thomas, who was called the twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, 'We have seen the Lord.' But he said to them, 'Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, and I put my finger in the mark of the nails, and my hand in his side, I am not going to believe.' A week later, his disciples were again in the house, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were shut and locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, 'Peace be with you.' Then he said to Thomas, 'Put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Do not doubt, but believe.' Thomas answered him, 'My Lord and my God.' Jesus said to him, 'Have you believed because you've seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen me and yet have come to believe.' Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written so that you may come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and through believing you may have life in his name." So Thomas's name means twin in its original language. Some theologians, that's people that study the Bible, some theologians say Thomas had an actual twin, while others think his name was more symbolic. They think he might have had two perspectives on life that seemed to be at odds with each other. I say both could be true, but if the latter is reality, then we might all be a little bit like Thomas. As you guys have probably guessed, I really enjoy cooking for people, which means I also enjoy eating that food with people. But I also desire to be healthy so I can be a father to my kids for quite a while, or sometimes I want to stay up late and have fun with my friends, but I also like to sleep and to function like somewhat of a human being. Does that sound familiar? Have you ever had competing desires or priorities? Can your perspective, opinion, or desire change depending on what day it is, who you are, who you're hanging out with, or where you are? If you can relate, know that this isn't unique to you. In fact, this is a shared human experience that we can all relate to. It's definitely something we all share with Thomas. We can be all in on something when things are going well and our friends are right there with us, and completely out when circumstances change. Like, I had a friend who went through a phase of only responding to text messages with smiley faces. It was, I guess, his way of easily changing his own circumstances. Like a smiley might mean he's coming to supper with us, but it could be sarcastic. We'd say like, "Hey, are you coming to dinner with us?" Smiley face. So is that a yes or a no? Smiley face. Cool. So Thomas joined this beautiful rebellion. And for Thomas, we see two competing desires in this moment that he had with his fellow disciples. He wanted to believe that Jesus was alive, but he also wanted proof. He wasn't going to put his faith and trust into this too good to be true news until he could encounter Jesus for himself. And lucky for Thomas, Jesus granted that request. He appeared to him in the flesh to give him the face-to-face encounter he needed in order to believe. And at the same time, he didn't shame Thomas for doubting in the first place. Sometime after this encounter with Jesus, Thomas began traveling as a missionary, sharing the story of Jesus throughout the world. Thomas traveled all the way from Israel to the southern tip of India, to a place known today as Kerala. That's around 2,985 miles away from Israel, and that was probably on foot. Thomas helped incredible numbers of people become followers of Jesus. He discipled them, he planted churches, and ultimately he gave his life for this story of Jesus. Thomas started an enduring movement of Jesus followers after he had experienced Jesus for himself. For Thomas and for us, the movement begins when we encounter Jesus. So you have to ask yourself 3 things. Number 1, do you want to encounter Jesus for yourself? Thomas did, and in fact, he couldn't settle for anything else. He needed to see Jesus with his own eyes. In the same way, Jesus might be moving you to pursue a real relationship with him, and not just take other people's word for it. When I first began following Jesus for myself, I remember not being satisfied with vicariously living through my friends and my family to know Jesus. I wanted to know Jesus for myself. Because Jesus wants us to know him for ourselves, he wasn't offended by Thomas's doubts and questions. Jesus wasn't opposed to helping Thomas to overcome these doubts and fears, and he feels the same way about you. Having and facing our doubts and questions are a necessary part of getting to know Jesus for ourselves. Do you have any questions or doubts that you might need to face? And number 2, are you ready to treat your faith like it's a movement? Once Thomas encountered Jesus, it turned his world upside down. It wasn't his beliefs that changed, it was everything else. Thomas couldn't imagine just going back to life as usual after that. And he understood that Jesus' resurrection changed everything, so his faith in Jesus led Thomas to action. Jesus didn't come to create a new set of religious beliefs that makes little impact on our daily lives. He came to create a full-on movement of people dedicated to changing the world. Faith is not just something we have and we hold on to for ourselves. It's a thing that launches us into this beautiful movement and changes us. Faith is just a starting point for the movement of love that will change the world. And the third question to ask yourself is, are you ready to go? Thomas and all of the disciples of Jesus were given a mission to go into all of the world and share the good news that God is real. Your world is your home. It's your hometown, it's your school, it could be your family or your friends, or it's the person sitting right next to you. God is wanting to move you into something that not only changes your life, but also your world. Are you ready to go into the world in order to help God change it for the better?